person of our male ally of the He's gonna introduce himself.
All right. Thank you for coming to Microsoft. And I just want to start by apologizing for the little too casual because all my suits and my shirts are either donated or it's being packed because the whole family is moving to Singapore at the end of the week. For those of you in Singapore, I don't think wearing a suit is an option. So today I'm here. I want to go through like what Microsoft, at least China, in the last few years, what we have done in terms of power, and then just a brief introduction. So as you can see, my new title is actually Microsoft Asia Pacific Chief of Staff, so that's the reason why I'm moving to Singapore. But before that, for the last 5 years, I was actually Greater China Chief of Staff, and then I was also the Chief Transformation Officer for Greater China. So the beauty about that role is I was able to involve in various transformation and the strategic initiative Microsoft Greater China headquarters has been taking. So I'm able to not only to participate and also be able to lead some of the key initiatives. Like the one, for instance, the last year we have done the most is on sustainability and also something we call Women Digital Future. So that is the one, right? I will include in my discussion. And I also include my LinkedIn here. So if any of you, afterwards would like to have a discussion on anything, right? That's probably the easiest platform within China and outside of China to get connected. I have to tell my new boss many times that if she pins me in WhatsApp, I cannot get it. It's not that I'm trying to ignore her or anything, it's just simply that it's blocked. But the problem with WhatsApp is not like sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't get it, so that's a problem. But anyway, so let's start by basically that. I think many of you may be familiar with this. That is something that when Satya Nadella took over as the CEO, he redefined our mission, Microsoft's mission. The old mission used to be, right, every household or every desktop has a PC or a computer. That was when Bill Gates started founding the company, that was what it was. But this is basically the new mission we have started. How do we empower every person and every organization to achieve more? I have to say, Satya has done a great job because everybody at Microsoft, we all can memorize this by heart. I will not say backwards because I cannot do it backwards. But then here you can see that empower every person. One key piece is actually every person. That also means, right, regardless of your gender, of your background, that's what we are trying to do. Because a key learning we had in the last few years when we try to do women in tech related initiatives, we have found very, very interesting insight is in your messaging and communication, it also needs to be inclusive. Because when we first started a few years ago, the headline essentially we basically said women in tech or something, and a lot of times I get questions, or some our male colleagues will feel, oh, it's not for me. Even though he wanted to join, but he may feel in a way kind of isolated because at the very top, the title already says women, right? So starting from last year, we started to change that. And then because at the end of the day, actually, I want you guys to think this way. Women enablement is important, yes, but the ultimate goal is actually diverse and inclusion. To achieve D&I, a key bottleneck or critical path here, at least in many places, including China, is women empowerment. That's how I would frame this, because regardless of the passion you may have, right, you have to keep in mind is we need to make sure that the other 50% of the population is included, right? And then, because if you at the very beginning make it, oh, it's women something, even though you have a very fine print says all genders are welcome, but you know how it is, right? So, and then I also want to see, because today, probably because of time, I also want to make this session interactive. Because I'm sharing what we have done, but that may not be applicable to you or your organization. So if any of you, if you see something, right, if you want to ask questions, just raise your hand, right? Instead of, me talking for a while and then in the last 30 minutes we do a Q&A, I think that will be a much better interaction. So, Microsoft actually, there's a very interesting survey we published. Since 2019, all Microsoft business, that means LinkedIn or GitHub or various of gaming studios that we have acquired but remain independent. right? So the last few years, Microsoft has acquired quite a few companies, but many of them actually is independently run. But if you include them all together, right, Microsoft and associated enterprises, in the last year, we have increased our, we call it the diversity of the employment, but at least worldwide we track, right, number of female employees has increased by at least 1%. Is at the worldwide level. But I'm happy to say, within China, we actually, at least in the sales and marketing side, about 1,000 of us, we have at least, we're the worldwide first area to achieve 40% of female employees. And that also includes a lot of technical roles. And later I will explain why it is important, because this is, I may as well just share it now. I remember in one of our discussions in the past, when we work with the local government officials, right, when we try to recruit like students, we try to recruit employees, and sometimes in China they would encourage us to do some innovation research or technology related in various cities, right? So we have a close partnership with the government. And I remember one of the government, I won't say who, a few years ago, they were surprised. We asked for his help to recruit female staff. His immediate reaction was, are you sure you are the first company that asked me to do it? And then his reasoning being, which we'll talk later, right? The reality that they see is sometimes they'll see if you go on maternity leave, right? You'll be out of the job for like at least 10 months. Some people see that as a hassle, at least in people's traditional point of view. But what we found actually that was a very interesting insight is how we want to change that behavior. Because at the end of the day, if you come think about it, being diverse and inclusive or having women empowerment is actually a good business decision. Why is that? Because think about it. In your organization, in most companies in the world, your customer base is at least, right, 50%. Female. But then, if you think about this, especially since the pandemic, when everybody's going through digital transformation, how many of such digital transformation experience, if you come think about your company and you think about it as a consumer or a customer of your company, is there any user experience or something that is designed for the female customer you want? A classic example, airbag. When the airbag was first developed and introduced, they later found out a problem. The airbag would actually become harmful or even damaging to people with petite size. I use the word petite size because originally they said will not be good for women. But then actually think about it, it's petite size. Why? Because everybody on that engineering team were male in the US. So by default, they would assume, those people are probably 6 feet, 5'10". So they were designed, but then you have to understand the impact of airbag is so significant. If you don't keep, I would say, petite size in mind, it actually causes more damage than protection. That is just one more of an extreme example, but the other example I want to say is this. We have a customer, because of the pandemic, they want to bring every of their business from the physical store to online, because they have to, because nobody's coming to the stores. But then they ran into a problem because most of the developers they were able to hire in that short period of time were male. But then their customer base is mostly female. The person that makes the decision of buying their goods is mostly female. So they actually, after the first couple of months, they receive the feedback is their application, their app is very hard to use. Because the developer's point of view, right, they just take something for granted, right? So that is something that I want to say is not only that our mission statement, but at the end of the day, it's actually, it is the right business to do. But then if you look at it right here, is what we see. If you look at it, out of all these new jobs created, right, in terms of technical jobs, right, data and AI, cloud computing and stuff like that, you can see female is actually underrepresented. And then the key thing here is we have done the research with LinkedIn. In the market of China, in the next 5 years, I think we'll have at least 60 million new jobs associated with technology. So if you recall the example I talked about, a customer trying to do e-commerce, they're having a hard time identifying female developers. You can see that would become a problem. Because you can already see it's already underrepresented. And then there's another thing here is especially very common here on this side I would say in the Chinese family or in the Asian family, women is expected to play multiple roles within a household. And that gets amplified even further in the pandemic. And there's a research done by McKinsey, actually, it is a worldwide research. It's very funny data that says for women that are married, they can actually end up spend, I think, 1 to 2% less time at work before they are married. Okay, fine, 1 to 2%. But the interesting part is this, for every man, after they got married, they actually got 1 to 2% more time to spend at work. In the laws of physics, right, somebody gains, somebody, because if you think about it, right, especially in the Asian culture, when somebody is ill at home, probably due to pandemic or there's a young kids or something, right? Usually by default, the expectation is for women to take care of the family. For every male, you're expected to go out, to how do I say this? Glorify the family name or something, right? So that is something. Of course, we are not talking about changing that concept overnight. But it is a real challenge here that we want to do here is we want to think about, at least when Microsoft approached this, we kind of think about for a female, there are different stages in their career or even say life. What does that mean is when you're at school, what access do you have to technology? We don't expect you to become a developer, but at least can you have a basic understanding of the tools so you can use them later, right? So that's when you're at school. But then once you join a company, at the early stage, usually everything goes well. But then there's always, I call them the lifetime decision period. That may force you, even willingly or unwillingly, to change track in your career. When I say life events, there are usually two things, either getting married or also having a kid. Because in my discussion with other CEOs of, in this case, a pharmaceutical CEO in China, she was telling me they have found a lot of times many of these great research talents, female talents, right, after being in the company for a few years, that they asked to move to another function, like a marketing function or some other function. And many of them give the reason why is because they are thinking about having a child or having a family. And even though nobody asked them to, but they expect that they will end up need to spend more time within the family, so they may not be able to cope with the demand of her current position. Even though she's super passionate about this, but then after thinking about it, she wants to move, right? So these type of things, I would say, is something that up to all of us. What can we do to make sure at least people that have a choice? What do I mean by choice is, if I want to stay within research side of things, understand we're going to have a family, but then here is what we have learned, as long as we plan it out ahead of time, we are able to manage. But the thing is, the leadership has to recognize we need to plan for it and make sure you have the support mechanism to make sure the system doesn't have any hidden blocks, that so people that wouldn't be kind of in a way that's being forced willingly or unwillingly to change their career path. And let me just start, right, when I talk about different stages, right, in the women's career, the one that we have done a lot actually is something we call ADA workshop. So what's ADA workshop? ADA workshop is basically for our research and development team. They engage with school universities to basically, the whole idea is to make sure that women understand what technology is, to get their interest. And why we call it ADA workshop? Because supposedly the very first programmer in human history is a lady named Ada. I can't remember his last name, but she was a daughter of a poet. And apparently one of the first project or so she worked on in the 1800s was working on an algorithm, some logic related thing. So she was being credited as the first female developer. But then here is that there's one interesting confusion people may have, because I remember in the past, especially in the year that when I was running the marketing organization at Microsoft Taiwan, a lot of audience would ask me, say, Jason, I'm a history major, I'm an English major, right? Back then I was talking more on the AI side of things, and they said, I have no clue how to do programming, right? I'm not good at it, I don't think I'm good at it, but then everything that you just talked about, everything seems to move into AI and all the things, so what can I do? A key concept I want people to understand, and hopefully the audience here when you leave this room, is nobody expecting everybody to become a developer. AI or big data, all the fancy word you heard, at the end of the day, it's only a tool. How can you use the tool is way more important than how the tool is made of. So let me paraphrase that. So in terms of AI, you don't have to be a programmer or a researcher or a PhD, go all the way in to understand the neural network and all the different layers of computer vision or natural language. No. All you have to do is understand what its strength and weakness. At least you are not afraid of it. You can go to study it, you have access to it, because at the end of the day, as we can see here in China, is the most important thing in digital technology is not about research, it's about the application of digital technology, right? If you recall at the very beginning, I said most by design, our customer base is 50% female. So how you use it, how you can have the insights on what the household or your customers' decision-making process is, that is way more important for you to understand all the nitty-gritty details about, how do I write a language in Python, how do I write a language in C, and that, I think that's a key concept. So that's why this whole, even though the ADAP workshop, right, we try to promote STEM, right, we work with the engineering, we work with people in different majors, but we want them to know what's the latest and how they can get access to it. Because I think my former supervisor, Alain, he was telling me his personal story was when he was in high school, by the way, he's French, so that was friends, probably a few decades ago. When he was in high school, a lot of the best people, right, doing great in math and science were female. But the interesting was, once he was in university, he was in engineering. These people are not in engineering anymore. They actually end up going into history, going into those humanity majors, and et cetera, right? And his observation that he was talking to a few people in their, I can't remember, 30-year reunion or something. They learned that it's not they didn't want to, but even in France back then, the expectation of female in the science, engineering track, it's not high, let's put it this way, right? So this is an important thing that we want to make sure to promote, that how can we get them at least be familiar with and not afraid of the topic of technology. It's just like, for those of you, if you may have a kid, right? I'm not sure how many of them are doing programming classes. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, for me to learn a language, it means to learn English, right? To make sure, besides Chinese. Now for the kids to learn a language, it's programming language, right? And then people kept asking me, Jason, which programming language should I use? Should I ask my kids to learn Python and all these things? No. Honestly, language doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's all about logic, how you think. Because the moment you learn a language today, by the time he or she is at work, I can tell you it's already obsolete, or not even need to be that long. 2-3 years later, something new will come up, right? But then, computer language learning is still important. Why? Because at least the kids can know what it is about, so he or she will not limit themselves. Just stereotypingly, whether willingly or unwillingly, say, I'm not good in this, right? So that I think is the most important thing in terms of how we do this. And once we are moved beyond in their life or career stages, once they are in to an enterprise, what we have done at Microsoft is that we are starting this women mentoring program is that we pair up so-called our Aspire hires. So who are Aspire hires? They are we can say the recent graduate hires, right? Whether you are a graduate school, MBA, or undergraduate, right? When you're coming in through this program, we call it Aspire program. And what we have done is that we are connecting them also with our senior female leaders. Because one thing important is a lot of things that a person goes through, most likely leaders or people, right, more experienced, they have gone through already. We are not saying that you have to copy what your mentor has done in a similar situation, but at least you can understand that what has been done in the past to show you the possibilities. Because what we also found is the objective of this program is not for you to copy or things, find the shortcuts, how you can do well in the enterprise. It's actually make sure that your visibility of what can be done or what's the thinking behind because of various decisions. That is the objective of this. So think about this as somewhere similar to, I would say, I would not use the word mentor, it's probably more of a coaching. Because if you think about the word coaching, coach is not here to do your job. Also at the same time, coach is not here to tell you what to do. Coach is actually here for you to encourage you to connect something that you may already have an idea. And then he or she helps you develop the idea yourself. Because only when ideas is developed by oneself, action will happen. If it was simply just being told of what to do, I'm not sure about your kids. Like my kids, I tell her what 100 times, never got it done. But then if he or she somehow had an epiphany for whatever reason, one day my son came to me after hearing a very inspiring story of a leader, how his hardship when he was young, forced him to work hard and stuff like that. He wrote little notes, in Chinese with some of the pinyin, essentially say, I will need to work hard, so so I can make you proud. Right after dinner, she wrote that to us, and then he started to change his behaviors. See, it's this. I'll say it's a coaching program is much better. Is that the whole idea is to encourage, basically whether you call it coachee or the Aspire hires on the other side. How can we do it? What's the role model? What are the things to think in different perspectives? So that's the thing we are starting doing with our early in career. Oh, sorry. Oh. FY21 means our fiscal year 21. So 2021. So the way Microsoft, sorry about this internal jargon. FY21 basically for calendar year, it means from July 2020 to end of June 2021. So that's FY. Basically, that's what it means. So if you heard FY22, that basically is now July 1st until the next calendar year of June 30th. We started last year. Because what we have found was in our annual Aspire program, that the intake we have across Greater China, we have about 60% of the new hires were female. But then what we have also found is that many of them, after a few years, they may move to other companies or try to do something else, and then we try to understand why, right? So one of the things here is that, I guess, for those of you who are in the MNCs, multinationals, right, you may face this. Let me share a personal coaching experience I had in this program. The person I was coaching, she's about late 20s, has been Aspire for about 5 years, has done great at Microsoft, right? Has been promoted every year, and now is looking after one of our largest accounts in China. And when she talked to me, she said her life is a complete failure. You see, why you say that? So, well, number one, I'm almost 30. I'm not married. Okay, so that I cannot control it. And number two, I'm not a manager. I said, why is that important to you? She said, well, all my fellow students at the MBA, now they're all people managers. They run a team of 50 or 100, if not more. So she would define her success, right? Honestly, if you think about it, in the eyes of others. Because first of all, she's not married. And secondly, she's not my manager. And then I cannot change exactly what she thinks, but then I asked her, do you know what it takes to be a manager? So once I share with her, once I became a manager, all the things that you have to do, after all the working hours and the things, you make sure that everybody on the team is feeling well, and then you have many extra work that's required. And she said, oh well, I never thought about it. Because in her mind, she thinks about manager is more of a status quo. Once I'm a manager, I made it. But then once you realize what manager really means, or at least at a company like Microsoft, because our structure is not like some local companies, which that Microsoft is meant to have as few layers as possible, right? And then sometimes an individual contributor may have more impact to the organization as say a manager of a local company. Right? Once she realizes that, then she starts to see things differently. She starts to measure herself at least on what impact she wanted to drive. So I'm not saying this is an example that applies to every story, but then that's what this mentor or coaching program is meant to do. Because how can you have that close one-on-one discussion, right? To talk about anything and everything. But then we also make sure the so-called coach, or you call it a mentor, is that don't tell the person what to do. But that's also one of our general manager principles. Because in the last couple of years, we have been teaching more managers. You have to be more coach-like. Because if you come think about it, in today's world, we heard about all this DT, digital transformation, the rapid changes and everything. Nobody can call himself an expert in it. The only thing you can do is how you can jointly work together to co-develop an approach or a solution. Even for a traditional IT project, it's the same. In the old days, in an IT project, people come to Microsoft and says, I want to do this. Teach me or do it for me. Usually there's a clear instruction of maybe 1,000 steps. If you do all of them, at the end, for instance, you have your email system up and running, you're done. But today, a lot of those projects we work with, nobody has done it before. It becomes a joint development, joint engagement. Nobody can call themselves an expert anymore. I can only say, we are the expert of digital tools, but I do not know your industry. And you are the experts of your industry and how we work together to figure out a solution so you can serve your customer better. It becomes this new approach. That's why also internally for all our managers. So see, this is not just male female anymore. It's for all the managers. That's how to become a coach. Because your team member would know the customer way better than you. You are a manager does not mean you make better judgments or you know the customers better. So how we get that go? So the whole thing here is that we need to, but then the thing here is, for some people that are more proactive, they may seek out their own mentor or coach. But what we simply try to do is how can we make it more structured? So at least people have access to that if they want to, so they don't have to go beyond, try to go through multiple connections to get to talk to one of the GMs of the organization. Yes, please. For this particular one, actually, we set up the program in terms of structure. We are actually focusing more on female talents. So connect them to a female leader. But then the thing I talked about, the coaching capability, that applies to all managers, male or female. So when I say a structure, is basically we wanted to start something to get it going. So that's why we start with these female talents and pair them up with a female leader. Or some of the male leaders if they want to join, because we don't want to, just like I said at the very beginning, we do not want to have the wrong messaging to isolate the other part of the population. And here, basically, at the end of the day, as I mentioned, everything has to do is with inclusion. So this is basically that one thing that we run, for instance, at Microsoft. We do run this internal and external inclusion conference every year. And last year, we did, well, this calendar year, it was a 5-day learning journey because everything has to be online. So we opened up 2 days for external audience, and then the other 2 days only is with internal. But one key concept we are pushing here is this. I'm not sure if you, in your organization, you are talking about this. We're talking about allyship and covering. So what does covering mean? Covering basically means that sometimes people are forced to be somebody else in order to be successful because he or she has to fit in. And this, I want to use my former supervisor, Alain, as another example again, because he said when he first started working, a while back, his manager was a female. But back then, the female management style was very different than the female leaders we see today at Microsoft. Because back in those days, the female supervisors or leaders are very, how do I say this, male-like. No, because it was expected. If you were the manager, that's how you behave, right? In a way, right, being dominant, try to, control this whole thing, vulnerability and weakness is something that you would never show. That was expected of the managers back then. So that's basically what I meant by the concept of covering. Because of the organization's behavior, people are forced to be somebody else, and somebody may be good at it. Somebody may do very well that try to have a different personality, at work to do well. But then what we are trying to do, at least last year we tried to focus is, how can we have the environment where people can be true to themselves and still be successful? And one of the ways to do this is allyship. So covering, I would say, is a symptom. And allyship is basically an approach how we can tackle that problem. Because we ask people, right, what does allyship mean? Allyship actually means, how can you help somebody or assist somebody in the way he or she prefers? I'm not sure if you run into a situation where a lot of times, you thought you did something helpful to somebody else, but then he or she, the reaction turned out to be very different than what you expect, just like my daughter to my wife. I'm still trying to get that concept working at home. It's a longer battle. But then you see, if you don't think in the other person's shoes, right, all your great gesture actually sometimes may turn out to be, the other person are forced to shut down or to be defensive, right? And in that case, you don't achieve what you want to do. So this is why I say that D&I, or diverse and inclusive, is the ultimate goal we are trying to get. Women empowerment is a very important, critical path, especially in Greater China, while I say most countries in Asia, is that something we need to do. But you always need to keep in mind, because that's ultimately what we're trying to get to. Because for those of you who may have worked in US, especially US, right, when you talk about diversity, it usually means also that not just on gender, but sometimes on race and all that. But then when you are in a more of a homogeneous society like in China, of course I know you will say, I'm 我是汉族, 对不对? 我是什么? But honestly, okay, it's hard to tell, right? It's this allyship and the D&I is a very important concept. That's also what we are trying to do. Okay. Yes, please. Yes. That means you are really listening. Taking all the notes, that's great. See, for covering, basically that sometimes associated, there is something that's called privilege. Basically, people cover themselves, so they have the privilege they could enjoy given that cover, right? In an example, I was telling my supervisor's whole story, right? His manager, a women manager back then, she was forced to act like men, if not more men, right? And because of that, in order to have that privilege that comes with it, But then here it is, right? Because people do that because at the end of the day, right, that's the end, that's the behavior, and this is something, the approach we want to tackle. Yes. So that is basically, if you want, I can share with you because it's one of the work done by a Japanese American law professor. I think it was in Yale or Stanford or something. And then he was the one that, originated this concept. And then last couple of years, he has been joining our virtual workshop basically to share his experience, not only because he's Japanese American, but he's also a gay. So he's trying to share all that as well. So this is basically the concept he has put together. It's actually the way I see it is a very nice system that does explain some of the behaviors why people do that, but at the same time, this allyship basically helps a way, at least for us at the enterprise level, how to somehow try to break that kind of systematic system. Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay. And the other one that we're trying to do, for those we talked about is more of an internal. Now we start to go something more external, is that we started, in partnership with our sister company, ThinkInt, we started to promote this concept about how women can actually lead all the innovation, how women can actually lead all the digital transformation. Because this is just simply started with a very basic concept, just like I talked about at the very beginning. Most companies, customers, by design or by default, should be 50% female, but why are all the developers or most of the person that created apps and all the experience and everything is mostly male? So what's the gap, right? How can we make sure that, so we need to make sure that female, this is basically one of the part of the series, right? How female can basically share their perspective, right? Because here is, we're trying to do different things, right? Across generations, we have more seasoned leaders, and we also have these recently joined, hires, and also different industries, and that basically to share with people that something has been done before, and something you can do, and want to encourage people of what this is. And in a way, we'll do this. You can see it's very important. We also include our male allies, because when we pick the audience and everything, we want to make sure it does not come as too one-sided, right? Because I probably said it 1 million times already, well, not 1 million times, 10 times now. It's how you make sure the other side of the population is also included, because only when that happens, you can have a systematic impact. And the last one I want to talk about is this something that we started a year ago in a partnership with a few other enterprises, something we call Women Digital Futures. And the one actually, you can see on the left-hand side, it's a summary essentially of what I just talked about. Because if you look at it, right, the thought leadership and insight, how we aspire and make sure all the women, they know something like this can be done. Right? And also another important thing is how we make sure there is access to digital skilling to make sure that the females, they are able to know what the tools are and basically how they can get themselves familiar. And then the other one is basically how to be a leader, a genuine leader as a female. Not like the example I quoted in the early days, right? A female leader essentially, you are forced to behave more like a male than female. So those were the ones that when we first started this initiative, that was something that we wanted to make sure from different aspects of it, how we can, probably say, not to start a movement, but try to start to do something here in China, externally, working in partnership with some other MNCs and organizations. And actually, there is a QR code here that, we put all our contents, sometimes some leadership training stuff, and also some materials that to help and enable various enterprises, if they want to do something within their enterprise, hopefully this will be somewhere for you to start, for you to get some tool sets to start with. And because you can think about it like in the technical jargon, it's like open source activity. So all the things we do, we posted online, and we just recently finished a white paper on how females affected under digital transformation in the enterprise, of various tier 1 and tier 2 cities. And that insight is actually what the program is trying to do is, in this coming year, we want to use this insight to see how we can do better, starting, let's say, from Microsoft, or starting from other MNCs we're partnering with, and also hopefully in engagement with the government to change something about what they're trying to do. And this is a general breakout of how this was first started, right? So Microsoft's role is, because of what we do, we provide all these digital skilling initiatives, whether online or in person, basically to make sure that people can have the familiarity of all these digital tools. And also at the end, you get certifications, and something that people can leverage in their careers. And then we are also in partnership with American HR consulting and capability leadership company called DEI. So what they provide is the inclusive leadership piece. How do you become a leader in this digital transformation period or era? And also how you be yourself, because as a female leader, how do we make sure that you can be in this? So they provide this leadership side of things. And then we also work with a nonprofit or social enterprise called Ladies Who Tech. They are the platform or the partner we approach because they have, I can't remember how many millions of members. Actually, Echo and I were just in their annual meeting in Shanghai 2 weeks ago, and then it was packed with different people, right, talking about trying to understand how this works, and then they packed the whole endless hotel, the standing rooms only. Basically, that is the medium we partner with to make sure that all the messaging, all the things are able to reach out. But most importantly, we are still actively in recruiting people or enterprises for this piece. It's because in every industry, their digital transformation journey is different. And it's only in that industry that can share with the audience or I would say the community is what they have done, what are the things they see, because at the end of the day, they are representing the actual market activities going on. So if you think about this that's what's happening in the country or in different enterprises. But we at DEI are providing digital and leadership skills. And then Ladies Who Tech is the nonprofit we work with to make sure that the messaging does spread out. So that is basically how the team partner together. And then how do we do this is, one of the concepts we are trying to do is how we make sure, right? What are these industries when they do digital transformation? What kind of skill they're looking for? Remember the example I was saying that, a consumer goods company was having a hard time identifying female programmers or female developers. But exactly what are they looking for? But then at the same time, can Microsoft, and other partners we have to help close that gap? And then and also in that discussion, right, we realized that we are trying to make sure the enterprises understand sometimes it is not a programming skill you're looking for. It is the application of the technology tools that is most important. And that is basically where we are working on, for this coming year. So that's the end of my sharing. Just Microsoft examples, of what we have done, of what we are trying to do, and some stories and insights. Hopefully, if you want to do something similar within your organization, that you can, I will not say, learn from us or try to have, so you don't step on some of the mistakes that we may have made along the way. And then, of course, we're more than happy to partner with any of your organizations to see what else can we do with all these external engagements, right? Try to, when you try to start a movement, or let's say when you try to start something in the market, right? You always have this first person, people think he or she's weird, jumping around doing something, but the moment you see the second person join in, the third person join in, and then people realize, oh, I better understand what they are trying to do. And then once you achieve that momentum, that's basically how things start. Okay, so that's my sharing, and I think we have some time to see if you guys have any questions or any comments you would love to share or ask. Actually, in this, it's very interesting. when we first started this, actually, we worked with a few other companies, right? We started only in January. So we asked all the CEOs, the China CEOs of these companies, like Microsoft, GSK, Manulife, right, to record, you know, some of whether their own experience or why they are doing this and what is the experience they have, right? Within that first week, all these the videos have at least 10 million people have viewed all these things we're trying to do. And then it's only the very first week, right? And then we start to have a series of different new videos. For instance, we just published with TDI their leadership materials, right, online in the WDF to make sure that so people have an understanding that to be a leader in today's digital era, especially for a female, but not limited to female, what kind of leadership capabilities are the things that you will need. So at least from that video, people can see, oh, okay, these are the 10 things I would need. And I ask myself, oh, okay, I probably have 6, or probably I only have 3, depending on your career. And then at least they know there's something that I need to improve. And then from there, right, they basically, whether through enterprise training or their own, right, whether you do it through the MBA or something, to make it up to that. So it's now, I think, also not only that, also with our skilling initiatives. I can't remember the exact number they showed you. The number of people has taken our so-called AI fundamentals all this time. I think basically Greater China is number 1 in our worldwide markets in terms of number of people have taken all these certifications. So far the traction is nice, but then it's only the beginning, right? It's something that, as I said, we will need different enterprise to come to join us because every industry will be different. We can only share what we have seen and some customer cases that be involved, but then we will need to everybody join hands together to really make a difference.
We also arranged for some offline sessions with all the kind of so-called member companies, and then it's also the opportunity for those companies to share that in their industry what's new, what's advanced, and then what's the next trend and everything. In addition to sharing all the technology trends with those.
Yeah, I think one of them. See, I hate to use the word member because it's not like a member or club that you have to go through initiation. No, it's basically just something that's why it's called it's like a open source initiative because we're working with different companies like auto or pharmaceutical, right? Just to name a few last few things we've done. They are trying to do something also to do D&I and also women empowerment within their enterprise. But what we have found is they invite another organization coming in, first of all, to share, to talk about more on the digital side, right? Gender independent topics. You can attract a lot more people to participate. And also people start to say, oh, right, this is not something just my company, for whatever reason they are doing. It's actually a trend in the industry or in the market that other people are doing. And then, so this awareness and the participation will be much better. And then sometimes Microsoft, when we do our own things, we invite them to come in because many of them will represent industry, could be a potential Microsoft customer or already a Microsoft customer. For our team to understand where they are trying to go. So I think that is something that we try to position like that. And also in our skilling initiative, right, it's very important we emphasize in our skilling communications to all external audiences. We never call out gender in our skilling initiative to all the enterprises or general public. However, in working with the organization helping us to do the skilling initiative, we agree we want to promote, we want to be able to reach at least 40% women in participation of the skill. So that's the reason why we are so mindful about the communication was exactly the reason I mentioned at the beginning. We don't want to make people feel, oh, sorry, I'm not part of it, right? But then when we actually in execution, at least we made it clear that was something we want to drive and then agree to it. We push for that kind of percentage participation. Oh no, this 40 is basically, this is external. So we want people to who join, the audience who listen to our online classes, or when we work with our enterprise customers, when we are there to train up their digital skills, we work with their organizing team to at least invite 40% of their women. So at least the participant in the classroom, I want to see at least 40% female represented. And the one you talked about, actually Greater China has already achieved 40% in our internal sales and marketing organization. We do have, I think 41, close to 41 something. It's the first Microsoft sales and marketing organization in the world to achieve above 40% so-called diverse. Yes, the very original slide you saw, that includes everybody, including LinkedIn, including GitHub, also the game studios that we have acquired, but they remain independently operated. That was basically brought. And then later you can get a copy of the slide. It actually does have a link to our white paper that shares more details, right? Because in the US, they track even more. They even track their ethnic background, like whether you're Hispanic or African American, but worldwide, we are only able to track gender. But in the US, they have further details. Yes, it's actually very diverse. Because originally we were expecting, right, technology companies or the young populations, right? And it turned out actually it was a lot more diverse than we expected because every company now, whether you're a traditional enterprise or you're a startup, they're all talking about digital transformation. So this topic is becoming like something everybody becomes a necessity to what you do. So that's why we found that there's no specific profile. Just for instance, even in the Ladies Who Tech annual meeting that I had in Shanghai at the beginning of the month, the career stage of the participants, right, is a lot more diverse than expected. But I would probably say my personal observation, probably 30-40% remains to be the early in career. So people probably between 22 to 26. But then there's also a sizable participant that's beyond that their career stage. So if I were to better answer that question, I would say the need is there. It's probably up to us to identify or create a better access for the needs to be able to match with the things that we are trying to get connected. So that's probably the better way of answering that. Well, no, I will call it differently. Yes, we do what we can do, because I do have to say we have a lot more resources probably than other organizations. But then even with that, we are unable to do everything. So that's why I say, right, people coming from different organizations and different enterprises, you could participate because sharing your industry's perspective, because I'm never the expert of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Right? I'm never the expert that say in EVs. I'm never the expert in that. But then we do have the platform and access to companies or individuals that are experts there. So in a way, right, we are playing this platform to get people connected. And a basic partnership with Ladies Who Tech is they have their existing communities. I remember a few months ago we went straight to Shenzhen because the founder and I feel like Shenzhen is the place that people, when you think about Shenzhen, you think about all the male developers, right? You can call it all the geeks, down there working in different companies. But then I was shocked how many people turn out. It's like within a very short period of time, like 200 plus people turn out, and then they are all actually women working in the tech industry in Shenzhen. And then so many people, they came to me, they saying within their organization, they never had this. Unfortunately, that for a lot of domestic enterprises, this is not yet a priority for the leadership. But then from the feedback, when I talk to them, right, the need and what they want is actually there. So that's why we are starting, right, a series of, every month we have activities in Shenzhen to make sure that we help cover that and connect them. So I would say no company is too small or no individual is too small, because if you have a passion and think, right, this is where we can always to have something to work to.
Yeah, so this was such a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. My question to you is, you see very good activities happening in Microsoft and how you analyze people to increase the awareness of
Yes, that was the question. My supervisor said, "Hey, how do you measure this?" He was a finance person, right? And to start. No, I was telling him, right? Of course, we'll give us something. For instance, that we at the initial that I want to reach at least 10 million people, so that we're able to do with all those videos. But the other one is that we want to make sure that we can engage 1 million plus. 1 million plus meaning people have spent, I forgot the time, I think at least 5 or plus hours in those videos or in the physical events. Or physical events, if you come, we will track you as one to be engaged. Because sometimes, for these online things, you watch it for 10 seconds and you drop off. So we try to use that to give us an indication. I call that as an indication. Because it's never, yes, this is a very American company thing. Right? We try to get people to think, to do this is beyond just those numbers, right? It is something that is not a sales target. We still need a vision or an indicator to show we are moving towards the right direction. But at the end of the day, it's only so-called, I call it supportive metrics. The thing here is how we can get this done. Basically, that the feedbacks and coming back. So that's why it's very important for us to send out our monthly communications to our sponsors, to our leaders within Microsoft, because they need to feel they are proud or they are being involved, and that is something they can take that newsletter, for instance, for Alain to talk to his supervisor 2 levels up, about all the things we do. At least we are fortunate within Microsoft is this D&I and digital skilling. It is something at Brett Smith and Satya Nadella's level that we want to make sure that we can enable people to do. So, but in Greater China, we just want to also, not just on the general skilling of the population, we want to concentrate our effort is at least in organizing communication to female. So another measure we have, but we don't track it per gender, is the number of people certified in our fundamental certifications, right? So we still need those because I need to report those metrics back to corporate, so I have relevant so-called resources, aka money, that comes down. It's just the natural enterprise thing. Well, large companies, you have to do something like that. But then I want to emphasize, right? Yes, we do have kind of those indicators to show progress. We do need that, and also need to show it to people who control the resources that is something worthwhile doing. But then also, it's also important that how we get some of those examples. Let me share a story. It's not China, it's in our, for instance, our Malaysia subsidiary, right? They are sharing a great example how young girls were learning how to code with the Prime Minister of Malaysia. So Prime Minister at the time was Mahathir, right? He was like 95 or something like that. His second stint was the Prime Minister, right? So it was a very interesting but powerful story that you see a few 12-year-old and a 95-year-old Prime Minister, obviously a male, right? How to learn coding together, and how the young kids actually can teach him how to do different things. So those are the ones I would say very important. It's not like a metric, but that's important to rally your supporters, at the corporate side to, so they feel like it is worthwhile for them to contribute. So this I would say is also important, how to, I hate the word measure, but how to kind of assess the impact of the program. If you catch what I'm saying, right? It's not a clear answer of clear metrics, but we still need some kind of indicator to show progress. But I would say the inspirational side of the story is just about as important as the indicators.
It's like an aha moment, like, oh, I want to have that.
Well, there are a couple of things, right? First of all, it was actually it's Alain, my former supervisor. He was the one very passionate about doing this, right? But for me, the way I see it is because I have a daughter who is well, she's 9 and 12, right? Yeah, one daughter and one son, but then we will not have the third. So that's already decided. We will not have the third. But you could tell already the way girls and boys behaved actually are quite different. If you were to ask me, I would say my daughter is more like an artist. She doesn't think logically. She jumps around. But then my son is more logical. But I'm not saying it's because they were born like that, because I don't take that. But then I was trying to embrace the way my daughter thinks. Because the way I told my wife, which I'm still trying to convince her, is the way my son thinks may be more mainstream, logical and stuff like that. However, it's the unique one that could make a big difference when they are much older. If you catch what I mean? Like, for instance, right? You see all this singing contest or competition in China in the last 5 years, right? Having a good voice doesn't mean anything. Everybody has a good voice. But having a unique voice is probably more important for you to stand out or have a much bigger impact. Right? But then this event, I'm still trying to convince myself as well, like how to tell her the way to embrace the way she thinks. But then this is why I think that this is just important, and then I will say it is the right thing to do. But also at the same time, I kept telling our leaders, if your team is 80% female, that's also not the best thing. No, I'll just be very honest with you, because it is D&I we are going after. In most cases, in most of, for instance, Microsoft, in a lot of sales teams, we probably have like, all day 70% male, probably 30% female. Now it's more balanced at 50-50. But some teams, they do have way more female than male. And this is concept I'm still trying within our leadership teams for them to understand, especially HRs, because sometimes metrics gets too hard in the way. Because I can tell them, oh yeah, it's true, but then 80% female is also not healthy, because that's why I kept saying, no offense, to all that, is at the end that we are looking for diversity and inclusion. Right? We try to at least try to see if we can do 60-40 one way or the other across, that's perfect. But of course, if you look at all the stats, some team will have more than the others, right? But you cannot just stop once we achieve 40% overall. We need to look at individual teams to see how we can improve better. And that's just, at least personally, how I see it. Okay. Yes. Oh, sorry, final one, and I'll probably have to jump. Yes, please.
To have such programs and successful activities, what is the foundation or structure that's the driving force behind it to give it power? And how much of that is corporate and how much of that is from the markets to really make it?
I would say it's a cliche, but it is so true. Leader support is paramount. So, as I said, Microsoft, we are fortunate that at the headquarters level, our CEO and our president, they are pushing for skilling across, especially since pandemic, right? Digital skilling is something we want to enable everybody, so they are able to adapt to this new normal. But if not because of our Greater China CEO, Alan, he wants to emphasize on this women in tech or women digital future, we will not get this thing going. But then there's one thing very important. As a sponsor, it's not enough. You have to make him active and visible. So many times in enterprises, I'm not sure about your company or organization, a sponsor just simply said, oh yeah, I sent an email on behalf of everybody. And that's it. And then people are afraid to go ask him for something more. Because they thought, oh my God, the CEO sent an email, oh yes. No. You have to use him or use the sponsor as much as you can, because if he or she takes the sponsorship, it's a fair game to leverage him or her any way you see fit. And that's why, I ask him to come to do videos, I ask him to visit different companies, I ask him for money to do all different things. That is very important, because so many times we see, especially in Asian enterprises, sponsor is somehow visible, but it's not too active. But if that's the case, then your impact will be so much smaller. So how do you have to make sure to leverage the person both active and visible? And then make sure that, you or she understands. And then actually most of the time they do. It's just sometimes we are limited ourselves because we are afraid to ask the Greater China CEO for something. But then at least for me, because I was his chief of staff, so I don't have this problem. But then for many other people, I would say in your organization, I don't know the role you play. But if somebody has agreed to be a sponsor, it's very important up front you tell him or her what's expected out of you. It's not just an email, it's not just a video. We need you to be active in this. I think that is probably the most important.
Is there a strong policy foundation underneath?
What do you mean by strong policy foundation?
I mean, is it very clear to prevent, discrimination or to promote certain things? Does Microsoft have very universal policy or China policy?
Yes, actually we do have it. Actually something, if still on the policy side, something needs to happen. For instance, in Microsoft China, right, we don't call it maternity leave anymore, we call it parental.
Yeah.
I can't-
For the fathers or for the other side,
For
it's
instance,
just
right.
parental leave.
So basically we offer that when you have a new baby and a care leave and all this all that. And also now internally that we do have a hard requirement. Sometimes you still need a hard requirement. Every position we interview, especially position above certain seniority, needs to have a female candidate, and most of the time we want to have an external female candidate as well. So that is something, because let's be honest, right? Change is not easy. Just think about how many times you try to do your fitness regimens, you try to change yourself, and that didn't really happen. So we also want to make sure that we have some kind of requirement to actually to induce the change. But at the same time, you need to make sure people know why we are doing this. So that's why that communication, and that's where also the active and visible sponsorship is important. And then also that you have to show that, for instance, we recently announced a few partner promotions, right, which was very senior position, right? Out of the three, if I recall, at least one was female, right? And then we published different kind of stats and data to show, and then also within leadership team, we are very clear about, for instance, we are great with female up to a certain level, but once beyond certain level, there's still room for improvement. So that's why the One China leadership team has made a conscious decision, right? Beyond this, so-called candidate at least one candidate has to be women, how can we also work with our recruiting team to make sure we identify the right thing, and also make sure people know that we are looking, or we are having tried to create an environment that for all the female senior leaders can excel. That's also something that we're trying to do. Okay, yes, final question.
How much parental leave do you give men, and do you try to force them to take at least 1 or 2 weeks?
It's 6 weeks. 6 weeks.
Men,
6 weeks when they have new baby.
and they don't take how much?
They need to take it more. They need to take it.
Well, no, we don't force people.
Force them, but
We don't force people. But then now we start to see, yes, I understand where your question coming from, right? Because when this first thing started, not Microsoft example, we also hear it I saw in other reporting, for instance, in Japan, they have this for a long time, but nobody took. No, that's true, because having a policy there doesn't mean people will do it, right? So we are actually trying to make sure that all the managers understand, and also at Microsoft, we also do something even more, right? We even announced that everybody within this year, we have a 5-day so-called well-being holiday. Announced by our head of HR, worldwide, everybody can do it. And then this is something that, for you to take, you don't even need to go through the system, just to your manager, I'm taking a well-being holiday. And also that within different areas, for instance, Asia Pacific I'm in, we have identified, we already announced ahead of time. These few days are your quiet days or quiet week. At least internally, we do not have any large meetings. At least get that thing out of people's way, because you say you have a well-being or quiet week, right? And then your supervisor organized a 30-people meeting. So we try to make sure that at least at the management level that they do behave like that, right? So yes, it does take time from people from policy to actually taking it to change the behavior. So that's why I was saying, right, all these different things, whether you talk about one-on-one time and how the leadership makes that, because the one-on-one time also happens between, we call it M3 manager to M2, to make sure how we get that concept across, and how we make sure people know that this is actually the right thing to do, because you give people time off, they actually do perform better. It's just somehow in this part of the world, we have, what, 996, right? Or 007. But then now you start to see even the local IT companies, right? ByteDance was the most visible one. They said they're canceling so-called big weekends, small weekend. But obviously, you can say canceling is one thing, but do they actually do it? But then, just for information, internally at Microsoft, we do look at our behavior dashboard to make sure that how we can see the spikes of people who work overtime and all that kind of stuff like that to make sure there is a balance. Because we always want to leave it to the managers' empowerment to decide what's best for them, but at least at the leadership level, we want to make sure we are moving towards the right direction. Yes. And I'm sorry, I really have to go. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any more questions? I'm still here. We do have, talking about measurement, a few more things that we can share is that we do have a very strong D&I culture, whereas everybody needs to go through all the courses, and then we have workshops, sharings, and then we do encourage like every individual to share their own stories, whether it's good story, being an ally, or whether it's a sort of like sad stories where you're being bullied or whatever, right? So we do encourage everybody to share their stories, and then so that we can really understand as to, in certain circumstances, how should you respond, and how to be a good ally as well. And then based on this, every manager actually has, I'm sure you will have, we will have this employee satisfaction survey. In this company, we call it MS Poll. Okay, so in MS Poll, there is specific sessions talking about whether your manager is being inclusive in D&I, how is he upholding all this, and whether the team is being inclusive enough or not. And then when the result is out, we actually, first thing I look at is that score and see how am I being measured by, perceived by my team members, and what are the areas that we as a group needs to improve as well. Yeah, so those are the things that we need to kind of do on a daily basis to encourage that.
Resources as a company provide to support and advance the D&I efforts, like dedicated team or personal employee volunteers.
Most of the time, there's no dedicated team for that, so every of us play a role in that. We do have what we call a D&I council within this company, and then within every area. So all the council members is actually part-time. So we get together on a regular basis. All the events that is organized and those is all part of it. So it's all volunteers. A lot of it was also helping with HR, of course.
Jason said that you reached 40%.
Yeah.
In self-employment.
Yeah.
In China, and I think he said China was the first country to reach this. The other ones have less than it.
Yeah.
Do you know in the US or Europe?
I think one of his slide earlier, that's 30-some%, that is the worldwide one. That's the whole.
But I thought it was also all the roles.
Yes.
Or is it just sales and marketing?
No, it's for all the roles, you're right. It also includes the R&D and some of the engineering side as well. But then I think for most of the sales organization, they're close to 40 these days, close to 40. We are kind of a little bit advanced in GCR.
And in tech, because sales and marketing in a sense is the easy piece to reach. What about the developers, engineers,
Sharon, do you have the score? Women's representation in the R&D side.
Yeah, I think we have around 2.5%. Around.
Yeah, so, and then when we say we're a sales and marketing organization, actually part of our organization are also quite technical advanced people. They are like those technical sales, and also we do have like delivery folks. And for them, we also stress this 40%, so that's a standard for them as well. And also the, we call this, for certain level and above, the candidate has to have one female external candidate. And we receive a lot of complaint from the school saying that you actually slow down my hiring process and all those. But we're saying, no, sorry, it has to be the standard. So they are kind of with that, and then right now, even for them, they already reach 40% as well.
In some tech companies, like yours, some engineers move on to sales and marketing at some point. Do you have some tools first?
You mean going back to,
Somebody that is not an engineer, but wants to develop that kind of, because maybe they're sales and marketing and they're good at it, but they eventually they're tired of seeing public and they want to be a little bit more developing side. Do you supply tools to keep upscale those
yeah, definitely, maybe Sharon, you want to share some more?
We have a lot of employee. I'm not. Yeah, we have a lot of kind of employee support program and the learning and trainings to help them to equip them with the technical skills for different kind of organization. Particularly, we have also actually many of the courses also available on LinkedIn as well. Many of the certification and the training program. So we encourage our people, no matter you are in the technical position or maybe in marketing maybe, but when you focus on something like Azure or Microsoft, big data or lines or necessary technical training online courses, especially during this pandemic. So I think many of our training, hard skill and soft skill training all
So I'll share a very interesting data. So many of you may know, you're part of the Women Advisory Council member family. Okay, this is why we're all here. So it's a great learning from each other. And we are doing a study called Healthy Women, Healthy Economy, which the report will be coming out in October. So we have worked with over 10 multinational corporations, plus over 100 women, and we did focus interviews. We interviewed their HR people, the head of HRs, and then we also then did secondary research. So that is very interesting because some of these things are questions will be answered. For example, just to give you a hint, so the paternity leave here in China, many multinationals all have them. The least they can do, China has some of the best maternity leave policies, we all know that. That can also be good and also not so good, okay? There's many reasons, so you can read it in the report. But paternity leave, so can you guess on the average how many days the father takes after having a baby? In China, this study's in China. Average, 7, 3, 2, 5. Okay, well you're getting all of it. 2 to 3. That's the average. Okay, and we're also trying to do the next studies to ask the men why. Those kinds of answers and so forth. So it is really, the policies are there for the men to take them, but they don't. And more importantly, what is so interesting we found is that many companies don't track it. They didn't even know. They're like, oh. So they're seen as a man in the company, but the spouse, it doesn't have anything to do with the spouse. So he could take a day off or two, but they don't track that as paternity leave. So they don't even know whether or not the fathers are taking those days off. So it's very interesting. These are the kind of amazing reports that we're sharing with you that what we're trying to do is figure out where the gaps are. And then what we're gonna be doing is sharing amazing from all our members, some of the best practices. Because there's a lot of best practices. Every single company is on their different journey. So it's not about, you know, who's the best, because everybody's on a different journey depending on what industry they are, okay, what their leadership is, what their headquarters is, what the policies are. So this is why the Women's Advisory Council, why it's powerful with this, is that there is the sharing, the learning, and the engagement, as what Jason says. We had amazing leadership, you know, support from all of our organization. That's one requirement that we ask for our Women Advisory Council members, is that you must engage on a high level. Without that, it doesn't work. Talks cheap, as they say. So, thank you, and we should take a picture. I love taking a picture. We should have a picture of Jesus with the